Hello, I'm James Ezimohan. You're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. The United States has extended the already fragile ceasefire with Iran, even as tensions persist. Pope Leo is concluding his Africa tour with a visit to Equatorial Guinea before returning to Rome. And U.S. lawmakers are warning of a Russian disinformation campaign ahead of Armenia's elections. A new fragile ceasefire extension between the United States and Iran is holding for now, but fresh doubts are emerging over the path to diplomacy, with both sides pulling back from a second round of talks as the Strait of Hormuz remains a central issue. Here's more.
The United States has extended its two-week ceasefire with Iran just hours before it was set to expire. President Donald Trump announced the decision, saying the pause will continue while Iran's leadership works on a unified proposal for talks. In a post on Truth Social, Trump also said Iran wants the Strait of Hormuz reopened to avoid losing oil revenue. However, he made clear the US will keep it totally blockaded, even as ceasefire talks continue. According to Trump, the move came after requests from Pakistan's military and political leadership. He said the Washington is willing to wait for diplomacy, but remains prepared for action if needed. The US military will also maintain its blockade of Iranian ports during this period. Iran, however, has sharply criticized the blockade. In his ex-post, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called it an act of war and a violation of the ceasefire. He warned that Iran would defend its interests and resist pressure. Some Iranian officials have gone further. An advisor to the Iranian parliament speaker said the blockade should be met with a military response, dismissing the ceasefire extension as meaningless. Regardless the ceasefire announcement extension, Iran has then confirmed it will not take part in the second round of talks with the United States in Islamabad that was due Wednesday, calling the decision definitive. Tehran says the move is meant to fully safeguard its national interests and cited contradictory messaging from Washington, along with its actions, as reasons behind the decision. Meanwhile, the White House also confirmed that Vice President J.D. Vance will not travel to Pakistan, adding that any updates on face-to-face US-Iran talks will be announced. However, shortly after, Iran's ambassador Reza Amiri Moghadam met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Islamabad, as President Donald Trump called off attacks on Iran indefinitely, with the two discussing the ongoing regional situation and peace efforts, though no further details were provided.
Tensions are rising between Iran and the European Union as Tehran sharply criticizes calls for further sanctions following recent regional developments. The exchange highlights deepening divisions at a time when diplomatic channels remain strained.
The Iranian embassies in the UK and Austria have strongly criticized the remarks by the EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas on imposition of wider sanctions on Tehran following its retaliatory measures in the region after the joint US-Israeli war on Iran. According to the state-owned IRNA news agency, the London embassy said in a post on its social platforms on Wednesday, "Let's talk about the European highway of hypocrisy. 168 Iranian school children massacred, bridges targeted, water infrastructure destroyed, EU response none, EU action sanctioned the victim. This is the new Berlin Wall of morality." It added, "Iran says Hormuz Strait is open, US says it is closed and impounds ships. EU response silence. US Navy targets Dena warship for fun, sailors killed. EU response silence. ICC arrest warrants for Israeli officials. EU response visits and hugs." In a stern criticism, the embassy also accused the European bloc of double standards, saying the Green Continent has sold its honor and issued the bill to the name of the Iranian students killed by the US air raids on a primary school in Minab, southern Iran. According to IRNA, the statement was made following the EU foreign policy chief accusing Iran of reckless U-turns on Tuesday, 21st of April. Also in Vienna, the Iranian mission warned that the repetition of any aggressive and provocative action, including the imposition of further sanctions, will have severe consequences for Europe. While Tehran and EU are already at loggerheads over the bloc's triggering reinstallment of UN nuclear sanctions in 2025, the Iranian mission said any future dialogue with Iran must be conducted with a rational, realistic, and utmost respect approach. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
For the first time since 2006, Palestinians in Gaza are heading to the polls. This weekend, the city of Deir al-Balah is holding municipal elections. The ballots will feature several pro-Hamas candidates, offering a measure of the group's local support after 2 years of war. Voting will take place across 12 centers, including tents and open fields. Palestinian officials described the election as a display of national unity with the West Bank. For many residents, it marks the first opportunity to cast a ballot in their lifetimes.
Regarding the election, for the first time in my life, in 20 years, I will have this feeling. I've been hearing about elections since I was born, but because of the circumstances, no elections take place. But this time, we are eager to take part in the election, and it's the first time we participate so we can change the reality imposed on us.
All the youths, all the age groups above 18, 99% of them will go vote. Everyone wants to improve the country, especially after 2 years of war, what we witnessed, and destruction.
Now, Germany has unveiled its new comprehensive military strategy, setting out an ambition to build Europe's strongest conventional army by 2039, as Berlin looks to strengthen deterrence against Russia. The plan keeps Germany's personnel target at around 460,000, including active troops and reservists. Air defense is a key priority, covering interceptors, drones, and protection against hypersonic missiles. The strategy also maps out a long-term push for more advanced weapons and greater use of artificial intelligence. A decision on the delayed FCAS fighter jet project could also come out this week. Ukraine says Russian missiles and drones have repeatedly flown near nuclear facilities, including the Chernobyl site, raising concerns over the risk of a major accident. Kyiv accuses Moscow of using routes near nuclear facilities to intimidate and potentially avoid air defenses. However, Russia has yet to comment on the claims. The International Atomic Energy Agency has warned that military activity near nuclear sites poses serious risks and urged restraint. The warning comes as Ukraine prepares to mark the 40th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. Now, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has said she expects positive decisions on a €90 billion loan for Ukraine to be made on Wednesday. The breakthrough follows Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's announcement that the Druzhba pipeline, which carries Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia, has been repaired and can resume operations, a condition Hungary's outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orban said was necessary to lift his veto. If approved this week, Kyiv could receive the funds in May, providing vital economic relief amid the ongoing conflict with Russia. The Druzhba pipeline is again at the center of Europe's energy and political tensions, showing how supply routes are now closely tied to disputes between Ukraine, Russia, and EU states.
Russian oil has resumed flowing through the Druzhba pipeline across Ukrainian territory on Wednesday, ending months of disruption. The restart is seen as paving the way for progress on an EU loan package intended for Ukraine. The Kremlin said on Tuesday that Russia is technically ready to resume oil supplies to Hungary and Slovakia via the Druzhba pipeline. Moscow added that it is prepared to proceed once conditions it attributes to Ukraine are resolved.
As things stand, you are aware that the Russian side remains technically ready. We have contractual obligations with Hungary, but following the start of the Kiev regime's blackmail, deliveries have been halted. Everything depends on the Kiev regime, whether they will open the pipeline and stop the blackmail.
Outgoing Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and Slovakia have been at odds with Kiev over the suspension of Russian oil supplies through Ukrainian territory.
The trust has been severely damaged between Slovakia and Ukraine as far as the ability to keep promises is concerned shown. Under these circumstances, I wouldn't be surprised if the €90 billion loan were to be released, and then, shortly thereafter, oil supplies were halted again, if the Druzhba pipeline is opened at all. They are notifying the technical structures that the pipeline is being pressurized, that some preparatory steps are being taken, just as preparatory steps are being taken to unblock the loan that I mentioned. So preparatory steps are being taken to open the Druzhba pipeline. I will not comment on what led to this.
Kyiv says the Druzhba pipeline was damaged following a Russian attack at the end of January. As a result, oil supplies to Hungary and Slovakia were halted. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the pipeline is expected to be back in operation by the end of April. During this period, the Druzhba pipeline has been a source of political dispute in Europe. Hungarian oil company MOL says Ukraine has confirmed that Russian oil transit has resumed. The first deliveries are expected to reach Hungary and Slovakia in the coming days. Pumping began at midday local time. Shortly afterwards, EU ambassadors approved a loan package for Ukraine that had previously been blocked by Hungary. Hungary and Slovakia accuse Ukraine of delaying repair work, while Kyiv rejects the claim. Both countries remain heavily dependent on Russian oil. Hungary is not contributing financially to the loan, but previously had the power to block it. The loan will cover a large part of Ukraine's funding needs for 2026 to 2027. Germany has said Kazakh oil will no longer be delivered via the Druzhba pipeline to the PCK Schwedt refinery from May, although production is not considered to be at risk. Russia is reported to be planning to halt Kazakh oil exports through Druzhba from 1st May, which could affect one of Germany's largest refineries. The refinery is currently under Rosneft management, which is assessing the situation. Berlin says supply security will be maintained. Officials say the situation does not pose a risk to Germany's overall fuel security. Rosneft has not yet commented.
UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing growing criticism from both the opposition and his own party amid the Peter Mandelson controversy. We now bring you the latest from London on the deepening tensions inside the government. A News London correspondent Ollie Barrett has more.
Well, Keir Starmer remains under significant pressure over the Peter Mandelson episode, and the opposition parties here in the UK continue to call for him to resign. But he used the Wednesday Prime Minister's question session to try and make the argument that actually the events of recent days show that he did follow due process in all of this, and that he should have been provided more information during the vetting part of the process by the Foreign Office. It was that he sacked the former Chief Civil Servant Sir Ollie Robbins from his Foreign Office role. Ollie Robbins gave evidence to MPs on Tuesday and talked about the pressure he felt that the Foreign Office was under to get the approval of Peter Mandelson's appointment to the embassy in Washington over the line. The Prime Minister denied that that was the case, and Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives during PMQs, tried to push the Prime Minister on all of this. She didn't necessarily land any blows during their back and forth, but it was also notable during Prime Minister's questions that the support from the Labour benches behind Keir Starmer, from those members of his own party, was not full-throated. It was not loud. It seemed very, very subdued indeed. So this is a Prime Minister who remains under fire, insists he's going to be staying in his job, but as I say, doesn't seem to have that full-throated backing from his own party at the point. One of the things, though, keeping Keir Starmer in his job for now, despite the controversy over Peter Mandelson's appointment to Washington ambassador and later having to be sacked because of his links to convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein, is that we have a funny situation where you don't have a Labour Party which is coalescing around some other kind of candidate for the leadership. You don't have yet cabinet resignations which could really force the issue for the Prime Minister. We also have local elections coming up, so any candidate who might be thinking about a leadership challenge would probably rather do that after those local elections if Labour are going to perform very badly indeed. And that's why many analysts here in the UK say that Keir Starmer is a leader in office but not necessarily in power at the moment. He has been weakened over the controversy about that appointment of Peter Mandelson to become US ambassador, later having to be sacked. But for now, as I say, Keir Starmer very much remains in post, even if he doesn't appear to be a very strong leader of his own Labour Party at the moment. Ollie Barrett in London for A News.
Now, Britain has approved a major new anti-smoking law aimed at creating a smoke-free generation while also tightening rules on vaping. The move marks one of the toughest public health measures the country has taken in years.
Children in Britain who are 17 or younger, and anyone born in the future, will never be able to legally buy cigarettes under a landmark new anti-smoking law approved by Parliament. The measure permanently bans tobacco sales to anyone born on or after January 1st, 2009, by raising the legal age for buying tobacco by 1 year every year. The Tobacco and Vapes Bill is expected to receive royal assent next week, and also tightens controls on vaping, including new restrictions on sales, advertising, displays and discounting.
Let me urge all noble lords to accept these amendments and note that this afternoon marks the end of this bill's journey throughout Parliament. It is a landmark bill, my lords. It will create a smoke-free generation. It is, in fact, the biggest public health intervention in a generation, and I can assure all noble lords it will save lives. I beg to move.
The government says the measures are designed to cut smoking rates, prevent young people from becoming addicted to nicotine, and ease long-term pressure on the National Health Service. New Zealand previously adopted a similar smoke-free generation law, but repealed it in 2024. Smoking causes around 64,000 deaths and 400,000 hospital admissions a year in England, according to official estimates, while costing the NHS around £3 billion annually. The new law also expands ministers' powers to regulate the flavours and packaging of tobacco, vaping and nicotine products, as policymakers step up efforts to curb youth vaping.
Spain rescued 32 migrants off the Canary Islands on Monday, coinciding with the launch of a mass amnesty program for undocumented individuals. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's government is spearheading this unique initiative, aiming to leverage migration to boost Spain's economy and counter its aging population. This approach sharply contrasts with a growing trend across Europe, where many governments are tightening border controls. Migrants have filled 3 out of every 4 new jobs since 2019 and accounted for 47% of economic growth since 2022. A criminal investigation is underway into an AI chatbot's possible link to a deadly US campus shooting, in a case that could test the boundaries of tech responsibility.
Authorities in Florida have launched a criminal probe into OpenAI and its chatbot ChatGPT following a shooting last year at Florida State University that left 2 people dead and 6 others injured. The state says the investigation will examine whether OpenAI could bear criminal responsibility in connection with the attack.
Saying that we are launching a criminal investigation into OpenAI and ChatGPT and will be sending criminal subpoenas to OpenAI probably right now. We have been looking into the recent FSU shooting and that shooter's communications with ChatGPT. Now, that communication and our review of that communication has revealed that a criminal investigation is necessary.
The Office of Statewide Prosecution has subpoenaed the company for records as part of the probe. Uthmeier alleges the chatbot provided the suspect with information about firearms before the shooting. OpenAI has denied any responsibility, calling the shooting a tragedy.
Prosecutors have looked at this and they've told me if it was a person on the other end of that screen, we would be charging them with murder. Communication between the shooter and ChatGPT revealed that the chatbot advised the shooter on what type of gun to use, on which ammo went with which gun, on whether or not a gun would be useful in short range. ChatGPT advised the shooter on what time of day would be appropriate for the shooting to interact with more people, and where on campus would be the place to encounter a higher population.
A company spokesperson says the chatbot provided factual information widely available online and did not promote harmful activity. OpenAI also says it identified an account linked to the suspect and shared that information with law enforcement.
Wednesday marked the most demanding leg of Pope Leo's visit to Equatorial Guinea. The pontiff took 3 separate flights across the country in a single day. He met with worshippers in multiple cities while continuing a tour that has firmly placed Africa at the center of his global mission.
Pope Leo is on the final full day of his African tour, travelling across Equatorial Guinea after departing the island capital, Malabo. His visit to the mainland cities of Mongomo and Bata comes after several days of strong messages delivered across the continent, condemning war, inequality and abuses of power. For many in Equatorial Guinea, the visit carries deep significance, particularly for young people, many of whom are witnessing a papal visit for the first time. For many students, this visit represents something rare and unforgettable.
Honestly, considering that the Pope is a very important figure worldwide, I think his visit to Equatorial Guinea, which is a very small country, I don't really know how to express it, but I'm very happy about it. I'm very happy.
As a young person, it's exciting and a good feeling that the Pope has arrived in Equatorial Guinea. For me personally, it's a privilege because during the previous Pope's visit many years ago, we didn't have the opportunity to witness it. But now we have the privilege of being able to experience the Pope's visit here, so I feel very happy and pleased about it.
We're very excited to have the Pope here. It's the first time he's coming here. For us young people, it's something incredible. We've never had an experience like this before, so we really appreciate it. It's something big, something epic.
In Bata, the pontiff is also expected to visit the site of the 2021 military barracks explosions that killed more than 100 people. A tragedy that deeply shocked the country and remains a symbol of both loss and inequality in the oil-rich nation. The enthusiasm reflects a broader sense of occasion in a country that has only hosted one papal visit before, when Pope John Paul II travelled there in 1982. Pope Leo's trip marks the final stop in a 10-day, 4-country African tour that has taken him to Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and now Equatorial Guinea, covering nearly 18,000 kilometres and 11 cities.
All right, after the break, we'll discuss whether the European Union is finally ready to unlock 90 billion euros in support for Ukraine and what that means for the war efforts. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. The European Union says it expects positive decisions on a delayed €90 billion loan for Ukraine after months of political resistance and renewed urgency for Kyiv's finances. To help us assess the stakes and likely outcome, we're joined by Gustavo de Aristegui, former diplomat from Rabat, Morocco. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Now, the EU says positive decisions are expected. What has changed politically in the last 48 hours?
Well, it's more like in the last 10 days. You need to understand that what has happened is that there has been an election in Hungary. There has been a change of political leadership in a country that was deeply against any kind of support for Ukraine and very much in the orbit of Moscow. And this has shattered all the possibilities of an effective, rapid, and deep understanding of the crisis and the help that Ukraine was desperately in need of. And let us not forget that this started as a donation of 140 billion euros that was transformed in the way into a 90 billion euro loan. But it was blocked by Hungary. Let's hope that now Slovakia, that was very much in the negative side of things, will actually accept that it is an absolute necessity to show that Europe is committed to its own security and defense, and that unfortunately the first line of that defense today is Ukraine.
Now, how urgent is this 90 billion euro package for Ukraine right now?
Well, it is not only urgent. This should have happened a year and a half ago, and unfortunately, the bureaucracy of the European Union and the fact that matters pertaining to security and foreign policy are under the unanimity rule, that makes it almost impossible for 27 nation states that have sometimes conflicting interests to actually align, even if the greater good and the general security of the whole group is at stake. And I really hope that this change of style, because of course, Peter Magyar, the new elected Prime Minister-elect of Hungary, is of course of center-right ascendance, but he is a person, a politician, a public servant that understands that the European Union is the only way that European nations that are weak alone are strong united. And the only way that we can defend ourselves is through the two mechanisms that we have, the Atlantic Alliance, NATO, and the European Union. The European Union still doesn't have a defense and security arm, but we need to build it strongly and urgently so that we are capable of committing ourselves to our own security, which is not the case, has not been the case for the last 40 years.
Now, is this loan mainly about sustaining Ukraine's economy or strengthening its military position?
It's actually a bit of both. If you look at the statistics that are available in the internet about defense expenditure, the two countries in the world that have the highest expenditure in relation to their GDP are Russia, and second place, very lower down the scale, Ukraine. So this is not just about defense expenditure. This is not just about arming or defending Ukraine. This is absolutely about giving the 50 million inhabitants of the greater region the possibility of getting out of the war crisis, of trying to survive the disasters of war and trying to preserve a very weakened economy because of almost 4 years of war. So right now, what we need to understand is in spite of the resilience of the people of Ukraine, its economy, and its leadership, their vitamins, their fuel, their energy is running dry. And right now, without these 90 billion euros, the Ukraine would be in very dire straits.
Now, I want to take you back to something you mentioned earlier about conflicting interests within Europe and also potential change of style. Hungary has delayed the package for months. Does that expose divisions inside the EU?
Well, it exposes divisions that happened in the past. We still have, of course, the Slovak, let's say, reticence and doubts about helping Ukraine and about confronting the Russian Federation. But Slovakia does not have the political resilience of Viktor Orban. And I do think that when you are just one and a relatively small country, although it is a very important country, and I will never ever, as a member, as a citizen of the European Union, try to diminish the importance of a single country, no matter how small it may be. May it be Cyprus or Malta or Luxembourg. All of them are essential to the force and the future of the Union. But Slovakia will understand at last that this is the right way to go. This is the right path. And this is the thing that morally, ethically, and for survival needs to be done.
Now, if approved, this 90 billion euro loan, how strong a signal does this send to Moscow?
Well, it is a very strong message to Moscow, yes, but still not strong enough. I would wish that we go back to the original plan of 140 billion.
All right, I think we've lost our guest. We'll try to get back to him as soon as possible. But for now, after the break, we'll take a look at key stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that the alliance is facing greater dangers on multiple fronts, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, from outer space to seabirds, from missiles and drones to sophisticated cyber attacks, Rutte added.
The dangers we are facing are great, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, from outer space to the seabed, from missiles and drones to sophisticated cyber attacks. Russia's war against Ukraine rages on. China's military modernization and nuclear expansion, they continue. And Iran is spreading terror and chaos, and you feel this prominently here in Turkey. In recent weeks, NATO has successfully intercepted ballistic missiles heading to Turkey from Iran on 4 separate occasions. NATO is prepared for such threats and will always do what is necessary to defend Turkey and all allies.
Now, more on this. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was in Ankara on Wednesday for talks with Turkish officials as the alliance sharpens its focus on defense readiness ahead of its July summit. In Ankara, Rutte met with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. During the visit, he also toured Turkish defense company Aselsan. He stressed the alliance's readiness to defend Turkey. He also highlighted Turkey's experience in defense production and innovation.
Companies like these are combining these two elements, the production and the innovation. It is a top priority for NATO. It will also be one of the key subjects at the NATO summit in Ankara, which will take place in July. Of course, we will celebrate that we are able collectively to increase the defense spending, but defense industrial production will be extremely important, because we have to do better, we have to do more, and we can learn a lot from what Turkey is doing here.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev met with Latvian President Edgar Rinkēvičs in Baku on Wednesday as part of the Latvian leader's official visit to the country. The two leaders first held a one-on-one meeting, followed by an expanded meeting with delegations from both sides. A ceremony for the exchange of 5 documents signed between Azerbaijan and Latvia was also held, with the participation of both presidents. In a press statement following talks with his Latvian counterpart, Aliyev said he was confident the visit would create strong opportunities for bilateral cooperation. He added that the two sides discussed various aspects of the bilateral agenda, as well as international issues of mutual interests. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said the bloc has discussed further steps to develop relations with Azerbaijan and has not ruled out expanding support for mine clearance efforts in the country. Kallas said the EU needs to strengthen ties on issues of mutual interest, including energy and trade, adding that Azerbaijan has been and remains a very reliable energy partner for EU member states. She also praised progress on the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process, describing it as a real opportunity for the entire region. Concerns are growing in Washington over what U.S. lawmakers describe as potential Russian disinformation targeting Armenia's upcoming election, with calls for tighter action from major tech platforms.
US lawmakers are warning of what they describe as a potential Russian disinformation effort targeting Armenia's upcoming parliamentary elections. Senators Jeanne Shaheen and Tom Tillis have urged tech companies Meta and Alphabet Inc. to increase efforts to counter manipulation ahead of the June 2026 vote. In letters to the companies, the senators say experts assess that Russia may be adapting tactics previously seen in Moldova to influence Armenia's democratic process. They cite findings by an Armenian civil society group reporting dozens of social media pages and channels spreading misleading election-related content, along with what they describe as coordinated inauthentic behavior. In their letter to Meta, senators wrote that Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has noted that people from Russia are being encouraged to support certain political parties. Press Secretary of the Prime Minister, Nazeli Bagdasaryan, warns that artificial intelligence is making disinformation more difficult to detect. She says fake leaks, including AI-generated audio, video and documents, could appear during the campaign. The concerns reflect a broader pattern of what is known as foreign information manipulation and interference. Studies by Western researchers say Russian-linked disinformation campaigns aim to influence voter behavior, weaken trust in institutions, and deepen political divisions, and have intensified across Central and Eastern Europe in recent years. Recent elections in the European Union, as well as votes in Romania, Moldova and Croatia, have been cited by analysts as potential targets. In Moldova, the BBC previously reported that a network it described as Russian-funded attempted to interfere in the country's 2025 parliamentary elections, including spreading false messaging and fake polling. Separately, NewsGuard identified a coordinated campaign known as Matryoshka, which it says pushed fabricated stories targeting President Maya Sandu ahead of the vote. Unofficial polling was also published online, suggesting the ruling party would lose, despite official surveys showing Sandu's party remained ahead. With Armenia's vote approaching, lawmakers say vigilance will be essential to protect electoral integrity.
Now, Brussels is pushing forward with new trade and energy routes bypassing global instability and focusing on the middle corridor. However, Georgia's crucial role is now in doubt due to its domestic policies. Our correspondent, Dini Nikolashvili, has more.
At a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Luxembourg on April 21st, Enlargement Commissioner Marta Koos laid out a clear priority. Europe is rapidly advancing its connectivity agenda, focusing on alternative trade and energy routes that bypass unstable corridors. With northern routes disrupted by Russia's war in Ukraine and southern routes affected by tensions involving Iran, Brussels is turning towards what is known as the Middle Corridor, a network linking Europe to Central Asia through the South Caucasus. But the key detail is this. Current EU engagement is actively moving forward with Armenia, Azerbaijan and Turkey, countries where concrete projects are already underway. Koos made it clear that connectivity today is not theoretical. It is about infrastructure, energy grids and functioning trade routes. Projects are being financed, partnerships deepened and strategic alignment accelerated. At the same time, Marta Koos acknowledged a critical reality. It is impossible to talk about a real connectivity agenda without Georgia. The country remains geographically essential, a natural transit bridge between Europe and Asia. In fact, EU-backed energy projects already link Armenia to Georgia, highlighting its structural importance. However, there is a growing gap between potential and participation. Georgia's role now depends not only on geography, but on political alignment. Koos noted that EU engagement can only go as far as Georgia itself is willing to cooperate. This comes amid increasingly strained relations between Tbilisi and Brussels, driven by controversial domestic policies and critical rhetoric from the Georgian government toward the EU. The result is a geopolitical paradox. At a moment when global instability creates a rare opportunity for Georgia to become a major transit hub, fulfilling a long-standing strategic ambition, the country appears less integrated into the very projects shaping that future. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
The regional pact is set to supercharge Central Asian trade, with Uzbekistan, Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan agreeing to streamline transit routes and bolster regional connectivity. Sevil Rajapova has more.
Uzbekistan, Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan have agreed to create a joint working group aimed at facilitating transit trade and the export of Afghan products. The agreement was reached during a trilateral meeting on the sidelines of the INAPROM Central Asia Industrial Exhibition. Representatives from the three countries' economic and trade ministries discussed expanding business cooperation, launching joint projects and improving regional logistics. A key focus was placed on diversifying transport routes, particularly as Afghanistan continues to reduce reliance on traditional corridors. The move comes amid growing regional trade. Trade between Afghanistan and Central Asia reached approximately $2.7 billion in 2025, with a target of increasing this figure to $10 billion in the coming years. Bilateral trade between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan has also expanded significantly, rising to around $1.68 billion in 2025, up 2.5 times compared to 2021. Large-scale infrastructure projects are also supporting this trend. Uzbekistan is advancing the Trans-Afghan Railway Initiative, a proposed 573-kilometer corridor linking Central and South Asia, expected to reduce cargo delivery times and expand transit capacity. In parallel, construction of the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway began in 2025, further strengthening regional connectivity. To support these developments, the three countries plan to coordinate tariff policies and introduce digital systems to simplify transit procedures and improve cross-border efficiency. The initiative is expected to strengthen trade flows, improve access to regional markets and position Central Asia as a key transit hub, connecting major economic corridors across Asia. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A-News.
China and India are accelerating their push into green hydrogen, pressing ahead with large-scale investments as Western momentum slows. With major projects, state backing and long-term targets, both are positioning themselves to shape a market still in its early stages.
China and India are continuing to make large-scale investments in the green hydrogen sector, even as interest in the West appears to be waning. In northern China's Inner Mongolia region, a $2 billion project in Chaifeng is using wind power to run electrolyzers that produce green hydrogen and ammonia. The output is mainly used for fertilizers, marine fuels, and low-emission steel production. India is also pursuing ambitious plans in the same field. Backed by around $2.1 billion in subsidies, New Delhi aims to produce 5 million tons of green hydrogen annually by 2030, a figure that far exceeds the current size of the global market. Western countries, meanwhile, have scaled back their initial ambitions due to high costs. Against this backdrop, China and India are seeking to shape the market through state support and long-term procurement mechanisms. China invested $3.7 billion in green hydrogen production last year and plans to reach 2.6 million tons of annual capacity by 2031. In India, production costs have fallen sharply in recent years, and the government expects them to decline further by 2032. Analysts say both countries could emerge as key players in the global green hydrogen market, driven by energy security concerns and broader industrial strategies.
China and Canada have agreed to significantly expand their air connectivity. The deal would double cargo flights and allow for more passenger services, aiming to meet surging demand for more trade and travel. Our correspondent, Maknu Makdum, now brings us the lead report.
China and Canada have agreed to expand air connectivity, increasing both passenger and cargo capacity to support rising trade and travel demand. Under the arrangement, each side will be permitted to operate up to 20 cargo flights per week, doubling the previous cap of 10. The agreement also provides for a phased increase in passenger services, including the addition of more direct routes and higher flight frequencies between key cities. The move also follows a period of high-level engagement between the two countries, including recent diplomatic exchanges aimed at stabilizing bilateral ties and restoring regular transport links disrupted in recent years. Cargo operations are expected to focus on high-value and time-sensitive goods such as electronics, industrial components, medical supplies, and perishables, improving delivery times and supply chain efficiency. The expansion comes as international aviation continues to recover, with both countries seeking to strengthen trade links and facilitate business and tourism flows. While no exact timeline has been publicly confirmed for the full rollout, officials indicate that the increases will be implemented gradually, subject to regulatory approvals and airline scheduling. Manu Makdum, A News, Beijing.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.